Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Bill Fowler, and I'm head of Semple Fraser's Renewable and Energy Group. Welcome to our webinar on the solar PV consultation, or to give it its correct but not so snappy official title, the Feed-in Tariff Scheme Consultation on Comprehensive Review, Phase 1 Tariffs for Solar PV. I have to say that given the weather in Edinburgh today, it is slightly incongruous to be talking about solar PV given the gales and driving rain outside. Anyway, before we get into the seminar itself, a couple of preliminary matters. Firstly, if you'll just indulge me, for those of you who don't know us, Semple Fraser is involved in a wide range of projects, from Ayrshire Power's proposed clean coal power station at Hunterston in Ayrshire, a variety of onshore wind projects with around 650 megawatts of projects underway at present, hydro schemes, anaerobic digestion, energy from waste, and of course solar PV. In the context of solar PV, we are acting for developers and commercial property owners and have a few projects trying to squeeze in before 12th December. However, we have also seen a number of projects get pulled as a direct result of this solar PV consultation. Before the formal part of the webinar, there are a few housekeeping points I should raise just now. I would welcome questions, and you can submit these throughout the presentation via the questions panel on your screen. I will try and answer questions at the end of the presentation, and we will not attribute them to you unless you're happy for us to do so. Simply put your name and company number at the end of the question. Further questions can also be submitted during the Q&A session. I anticipate that the presentation itself will take around 20 to 25 minutes and we'll then have time for questions at the end. We will also send out copies of the slides to everyone in the next couple of days. What I would like to do is firstly set the scene to the solar PV consultation by giving an overview of the comprehensive review. Then I'll take a brief look at why this review is taking place now, then run through some of the key elements of the consultation itself, and I'll then conclude with some personal thoughts and hopefully also answer some questions. So, what is the comprehensive review? The comprehensive review was announced earlier this year and has been undertaken a year in advance of the original schedule when the FIT scheme was first announced. This is in addition to the fast-track review of large-scale solar PV which took place in the summer and resulted in reduced tariffs for solar PV schemes of 50 kilowatts and above with effect from 1st August. The comprehensive review has been undertaken in two phases. The first phase is that which is current and relates to solar PV tariffs and closes on 23rd December. Phase 2 is due to commence by the end of this year, with the outcome being implemented by mid-2012. You will see that the government is clearly intent on driving through the changes to the FIT scheme in very short order for both Phase 1 and Phase 2, and this is in itself very controversial. Before moving on to the current proposals for Phase 1, I'll have a quick look at what's likely to come in Phase 2. So what will Phase 2 look at? There appear to be four key elements. Firstly, it will look at the appropriate tariffs for all other FIT technologies in addition to solar PV. Secondly, it's going to look at the cost control mechanisms which might be brought in order to ensure that the level of tariffs can keep pace with market conditions. This is primarily so that we can avoid the difficulties the current scheme is facing regarding levels of returns being generated on the solar PV projects, and that the scheme can be run within the DEC control framework and the overall spending envelope for FITs. It will also look at whether more can be done to enable genuine community projects to benefit from FITs, and whether the linkage proposed in the current consultation on solar PV to energy efficiency measures should be extended to other FIT technologies. There may also be a number of administrative matters looked at, and it may also be that the 50% deeming provision for electricity generated is looked at as well. So why is it that FITs are being reviewed again? There are three core reasons for this. Firstly, the rates of return which the government considers are being earned by people from solar PV are in the region of 10%, compared to the 5% which was originally targeted when the FIT scheme was launched. These increased returns have come about as a result of installation costs falling by around 30% and the global costs of PV modules falling by as much as 70% since 2008. In addition, electricity prices have risen by some 13% since April 2010 and by 7% alone since August of this year. The second reason, driven by these returns, is the high level of uptake of solar PV. The government's projected uptake of solar PV by April 2012 was 137 megawatts. However, the actual uptake to September 2011 is 250 megawatts. Now that 250 megawatts figure is based on projects actually entered on the Central FIT register, and on top of that there are projects which are known to be in the pipeline but which haven't yet made it to the register. These pipeline projects are in excess of 100 megawatts for 50 kilowatts plus schemes, and there are also a large number of sub 50 kilowatt projects in the pipeline. So clearly there is a much greater uptake than the government had anticipated. The final reason for the review is that due to the combination of these high returns and the level of uptake, the government has a real concern that the spending envelope for the FIT scheme will be exceeded, and that they require to take action to bring the FIT scheme back within the control framework for the DECC levy-funded spending. You will recall that as part of the 2010 spending review, there was an agreement that £40 million of savings would be made to the FIT's budget for the period to March 2015. I thought I should touch briefly on what the DECC levy-funded spending control framework is. This is an agreement between DECC and Treasury to ensure that fuel poverty, energy and climate change goals are met in a way which is consistent with economic recovery and minimises the impact upon consumer electricity bills. Where the FIT scheme is forecast to overspend against the funding envelope, then DECC will have to develop plans to bring spending back within the cap, and it is this which is driving the current FIT's consultation. It's worth noting a couple of key points at this stage in relation to the control framework. Firstly, it confirms that government policy is not to make retrospective changes and to maintain support levels for existing investments where it has said they would do so, and also to provide policy stability. However, these objectives have to be achieved cost-effectively and affordably. Cost-effectiveness and affordability are the key drivers of this consultation proposal. So turning now to the solar PV consultation itself, there are three core proposals to this. Firstly, there is a general reduction in feed-in tariffs proposed for schemes up to 250 kilowatts. There is then a new multi-installation tariff rate proposed. And finally, there is a new linkage of the rate of tariffs which will be payable to the energy efficiency performance of the buildings on which the solar PV is attached or wired to. Now, this next slide shows the changes to the tariffs and demonstrates the extremely dramatic cuts which are being proposed and which are much greater than, I think it's fair to say, industry had been anticipating. It's also worth noting that the tariffs for the 50 to 250 kilowatt schemes are further reductions from those already reduced levels introduced as part of the fast-track review in August. Clearly, the scale of the cuts in the tariffs is controversial. However, equally controversial is the fact that although the new tariffs would come into effect on 1st April 2012, they are given effect to by reference to a reference date of 12th December. In other words, a date before the consultation actually closes. The effect of this is that if your eligibility date is before 12th December, then you will be on the current tariffs. If your eligibility date is between 12th December and 31st March 2012, you will benefit from the existing tariffs up to 31st March 2012 and would then move on to the new tariffs from 1st April. Where your eligibility date is post 31st March 2012, you would be on the new tariffs from the outset. Now, I'll briefly look at the eligibility date in a minute. The key feature here is therefore the 12th December reference date. And as I've mentioned, this is before the consultation actually closes. This gives lie to a strong suggestion that this is in reality not really a consultation at all, but is in fact a predetermined outcome driven purely by financial pressures on the government. Friends of the Earth and some solar developers have raised judicial review proceedings in England, and the courts rejected this on 5th December. However, my current understanding is that they are proposing an appeal. So, although the 12th December date is not technically a retrospective change, in my view it amounts to the same thing, given that so little notice has been given to businesses to actually implement schemes in advance of that date. So I thought it would be helpful, given the importance of 12th December and the eligibility date, to have a brief look at what is meant by eligibility date. Essentially, it's the later of three dates. The first two dates depend on the size of your scheme and are either the date upon which Ofgem receives your application for accreditation, or your FIT licensee receives your request for accreditation, or the date on which your installation is actually commissioned. I've also included on the slide the definition of commissioned. Now, in my experience, it is possible to fix your eligibility date on relatively short notice, and indeed in some cases a matter of days. However, some press comments and comments from opposition politicians which have been reported in the press regarding eligibility dates taking matters of weeks to obtain is in my view unhelpful and ill-informed. However, given that 12th December is only now a matter of days away, clearly time is not on your side if you're looking to implement schemes under the current tariff rates. The second aspect of the consultation is the new multi-installation tariff. This is designed to reduce the tariff payable to people who own or receive payments, FIT payments, from multiple installations, and is something which the government had not anticipated when designing the FIT scheme. The government considers that the economies of scale which can be brought to bear in the context of multiple installations justifies a 20% reduction to the standard tariffs and still enable returns to be earned at the targeted 5% rate. Now, these multiple installation tariffs will apply to all new installations with an eligibility date from 1st April 2012. In other words, anything which is installed at present would still receive the same tariffs as are currently available. This next slide shows the tariffs on the multi-installation basis, which are 80% of the standard proposed tariffs. Now, the final aspect of the consultation is the new linkage to energy efficiency performance. The linkage to energy efficiency was something which the government said it would consider introducing when it first introduced the FIT scheme, but it chose not to do so in order to avoid overcomplicating the scheme from the outset. The government believes that it is now right to introduce the energy efficiency linkage in order to maximise the effect of the FIT scheme on reducing carbon emissions. The government wishes to encourage a holistic whole-building approach to carbon emissions and wants energy efficiency measures to be the first step in tackling carbon emissions, as they are regarded as the most cost-effective measures in improving the energy performance of buildings. This new energy efficiency requirement will apply to all solar PV installations which are attached to or wired to a building to provide electricity to it, and which have an eligibility date on or after 1st April 2012. There will be a transitional period such that where your eligibility date is between 1st April 2012 and 31st March 2013, you will have a period of 12 months from your eligibility date in which to achieve the required energy efficiency standards. Now, the consequences of not meeting the required energy efficiency standard will be that you would only be entitled to a much reduced tariff rate of 9p per kilowatt. This reduced tariff will apply for the lifetime of the FIT's payments and would not be increased if, in the future, you met the necessary energy efficiency requirements. So how would energy efficiency be measured? Well, there are two proposals. The first is that the building must have an energy performance certificate of level C or above. At present, only around 14% of the UK building stock achieves this standard. If the EPC rating was reduced to level D, then around 50% of the building stock would achieve that standard. The alternative proposal is that the owner or occupier of the building should have undertaken all measures identified in the relevant EPC as potentially eligible for Green Deal finance. A couple of practical points on this is that we are expecting a new form of EPC certificate to be issued in April of next year, and we have also just received the Green Deal and Energy Company Obligation Consultation document at the end of November, and this needs to be reviewed in this context. So to conclude, I thought I would give you a few thoughts of my own, and then we can move on to some questions, hopefully. First and foremost, in my view, the continual changes to the FiT scheme is undermining business and investor confidence, especially in the face of such large and rapid cuts. The stability and confidence required to enable long-term business and investment decisions has been removed almost at a stroke, or several strokes as the various PV consultations have taken place. It is also essential that the government delivers on its stated aim to provide policy stability. If the government can take this approach to FiTs, could it do the same to other incentive schemes such as the renewable heat incentive? Time will tell. There could also yet be a further sting in the tail when the Phase 2 consultation is issued. What will the cost control mechanisms look like, and what impact could they have on future returns on your installations? There is widespread consensus that the proposed cuts are too deep and do not provide the level of returns required to enable investment decisions to be made. That said, with energy prices continuing to rise, it may well be that in the not too distant future the position will stabilise and projects will be investable again. Only the government truly knows how urgently they need to rebalance the FiT scheme to remain within the spending envelope. The balance between affordability and delivering the low-carbon economy to help the country emerge from the current economic mire and address our climate change targets is, I admit, not an easy one. However, perhaps a more phased approach to reducing the tariffs would not jeopardise so many jobs and projects which businesses had already budgeted for and invested in. The reference date of 12th December is clearly controversial and effectively allowed businesses only 6 weeks to deliver projects, many of which have been in the pipeline for months now. The complexities of negotiating leases of rooftops, negotiating power supply agreements, ordering stock, getting installation timetables sorted, getting your grid connection organised, all take time. We know from our own experience that for many projects it has simply not been possible to deliver them for the 12th, given the short period of notice the government gave. These projects have been scrapped. A reference date of, say, 1st April 2012 might be a more fair period to allow businesses to plan and implement projects that had already been budgeted for and committed to. While I admit that may result in a bubble of projects seeking to be completed by 1st April 2012, we were probably already going to see this in any event. Again, the government will have to make the judgment call between affordability and sustainability of FiTs and the jeopardising of capital already invested and many hundreds, if not thousands, of jobs in the solar industry. Carillion's announcement of large-scale redundancies only a couple of days ago is clear evidence that this is not industry scaremongering, but is a real concern. In relation to the multi-installation tariff, it seems strange to me that it applies as soon as you have more than one installation. It would seem more appropriate for there to be a minimum number of installations, or perhaps a threshold capacity, before it would apply. And in addition, there might also be a sliding scale of the reduction in tariffs. However, I admit that this might be more difficult to implement and monitor. Finally, in relation to the energy efficiency requirement, seeking to maximise the impact of FiTs in this way does, in my view, make absolute sense. However, again, we seem to be providing building owners with very little time to make the necessary energy efficiency improvements. Again, the budgets for energy efficiency measures will for many already be fixed, and in the current climate, investment decisions may have focused capital elsewhere in the short term. Building owners may need more time to adjust to the new regime and to get to grips with either the new EPC, linkage or Green Deal finance, whichever is chosen. One way to allow this might be to extend the transitional period by 6 or 12 months, and another could be to allow the standard tariffs to be reinstated when the necessary energy efficiency requirements have actually been met. As you know, we sent you a short questionnaire when you registered for this webinar. We have had a number of responses so far, but would really appreciate it if you haven't already done so, if you could spend 10 or 15 minutes to complete it so that we have a much more representative set of responses which we can include in our response to the consultation. I thought you would be interested in a flavour of the initial responses which we've received, most of which won't come as a huge surprise. Firstly, there is almost unanimous rejection of the proposed tariffs and the reference date of 12th December. Secondly, most respondents agreed with the multi-installation tariffs but disagree with the level of cut proposed. Almost all respondents agree with the energy efficiency requirement and that it should apply to all buildings, whether domestic or commercial. A majority agree that the Green Deal measures should be the test rather than the EPC-linked test. However, there was a significant minority who preferred the EPC route. Most respondents agreed that there should be a transitional period in which the standard tariffs would be payable, but there was a divergence of opinion on the length of the transitional period and the period to install the necessary efficiency measures. Once again, thank you if you have completed our questionnaire, and if you hadn't yet, if you could spare 10 or 15 minutes to do so, that would be very much appreciated. Now, that's the end of the formal part of the seminar. We do have a few questions which have been sent in, which I'll now take. I'll read the questions out and then try and answer them. If I can't answer anything during the live section of the webinar, we will get back to you separately offline. So the first question is the obvious and general question that you would expect. Is it still going to be worth it? Well, I think the answer is it may well be worth it, maybe not in the immediate short term, but given the forecast direction that energy prices are going, it won't be long before the savings on energy bills will justify the investment in solar PV technology. As a reminder, last year DEC issued a paper which estimated the impact of energy and climate change policies and of policies on energy bills. It estimated that by 2015, for your average commercial business user and consumer of electricity, energy bills would increase by 11% or £150,000 per annum, and by 2020, some £368,000 per annum or 26%. I think when you start looking at these prices, which is purely the policy impact, let alone market forces, it's clear that trying to find ways of reduce your energy bills as well as reduce your consumption of energy will make sense. Another question we've been asked is, am I correct in understanding that the building will qualify for the best rate of fit if the building is band C or better? That is correct. Band C, if the EPC route is chosen, is the one that is chosen. Once you hit that level, even if you exceed that level, there is no change to the level of the tariffs. You simply qualify for the standard rate tariffs. A further question which has just come in is, do I need to be connected to the grid in order to be commissioned? Well, that's actually a good question, and there's been a bit of debate about that. We were looking into this for a client only yesterday. The definition of commissioned is that an installation is commissioned upon completion of such procedures and tests as constitute at the time they're undertaken the usual industry standards and practices for commissioning of that type of installation in order to demonstrate that it is capable of operation. So you'll see from that definition there is no reference to grid connection. It's simply being demonstrated as capable of operation. We sought to clarify this with the Energy Savings Trust yesterday, and after a few calls they did contact us and say that yes, indeed, grid connection was required. However, the position is not clear, and in my view that's not what is required by the definition, and so there will be potential for some debate there. I think we've got another question just coming, if you just bear with me. We've had a comment sent in by someone essentially saying that in preparation for the Green Deal, become a distributor for solar PV, successful in having systems installed and have quotes in the pipeline. There's a great deal of time and effort by owners and with government doing this. They can just do anything to the fit. I think ultimately the answer is in the long term, investing in solar PV and indeed other FITS technologies should prove to be a good investment. The tariff rates are targeted at giving people a rate of return of between 5 and 8%. There is some discussion as to whether that targeted rate of consent is indeed what commercial organisations actually need to achieve and whether it shouldn't be higher, of such as 10 or more %. However, given the likely direction of travel of energy bills, I would have thought that these measures will make sense to implement. As I say, maybe not in the immediate short term, but in the longer term. Ladies and gentlemen, that is us exhausted the questions which have been sent in. I hope that you found the webinar of interest and use. We will be submitting our response to the consultation and we'll post a copy of our response for information. As I say, if anybody has any subsequent questions or issues they would like to discuss offline, I'd be very happy to do that. My contact details are on the slide, and as I say, we will be posting the slides out to people. So thank you for attending, and hope the rest of your day is not too stormy.
The organizer has